Today we are going to discuss about parenting and how parenting can be the best opportunity for self-development. And I will start with talking about projection. As a human being, not necessarily as a parent, we are always projecting things on the outside, mostly our fears and insecurities. And this happens, of course, unconsciously. We are not trying to harm anyone, but think about the last time when you were angry. Was it really that person the problem, or some sort of fears or insecurities that that person triggered in you, and the trigger itself was enough for you to not be able to keep in yourself what you maybe carried with you for the last few days or something. The problem with projection is that it will harm everyone that we are in contact with in ways that we can not really predict when this happens. And until the time you get to parenthood, maybe it's not necessarily that big of a concern because we are interacting with adults most of the time. And I feel that each adult person is somehow responsible for um, regulating their own emotions and be able to filter out those elements that come from the outside, which are not really helping them in any way. So it's our responsibility to filter out the anger in the world, if you want, and protect ourselves. But when it comes to parenthood and having small children absorbing everything from you all day long, this becomes a much bigger problem. And it only adds up on top of, like, it adds up as additional pressure for parents who are willing to do their best to raise their kids in the best way possible. And of course, that pressure doesn't help. So I would like to give you a different framing about projection and look at it as not something to be afraid of, to think from now on how you can stop projecting, because this is anyway not possible really to do it, but instead use projection and projecting your own fears and insecurities as a self-assessment tool instead. And this, if you do it like this, the projecting becomes a tool that allows you to find out where exactly you need to do the work. Um, and the good part is that once you do this kind of work, the way you interact with your children improves by a natural outcome, as a natural byproduct of this. So this is the main benefit, right? As I think as parents, or at least I'm talking from my perspective, I feel this kind of responsibility to never go wrong. And the more I put this kind of pressure on myself, the more I am, the more I become fragile in a way, because ultimately I don't give myself the chance to be this kind of work in progress in front of my children, because I think that they should not see that. And as long as it's vulnerable and authentic, I think that's actually a healthy thing to do, because otherwise they will get the false impression that I'm somehow perfect and that they should emulate this perfection, which of course will take them on a road which doesn't allow themselves, where they will not allow themselves to be vulnerable, to be weak sometimes, and to be honest about their own insecurities with other human beings who would be willing to help. So I think, again, parenting, if you see it in the right way, can be an amazing vehicle for self-improvement. And this is how I see it. When you all know that when you have children, you don't think of yourself and about yourself that much anymore, and that comes down to literally not having that much time anymore to prioritize yourself. But there is also the emotional and responsibility component, where you tend to make yourself the vehicle for their own ideal growth in your mind, which means that you have to cut down from the things which are personal to you and you only, which is, I think, natural in a way. But you have to think about avoiding sacrifices while doing that, because the children, first of all, they didn't ask to be brought in the world. They are pure. They have this childlike curiosity, and they are questioning everything. And in their questioning, sometimes they might trigger you. uh, and of course, they don't know that they are just asking questions and asking questions and asking questions. And at some point, you're like, "Why are you asking me this?" But if you just become curious as they are, you find about themselves, about yourself, things that you didn't thought about ever, and that are actually very interesting to discover for yourself, because you learn things about yourself. And this relationship becomes very dynamic and very valuable, because you, at a certain point, you rely on their questioning and on their childlike curiosity to find things about yourself that you would have not had the opportunity to explore otherwise. And that's a beautiful gift that the kids offer to us. um, the only component, of course, in this is your own courage to be willing to spend the time in addressing maybe the same question from different angles, in actually being vulnerable and responding to questions that might make you uncomfortable. Um, and the nice thing is that this dynamic in itself is what kids need to evolve in a way that they themselves, when they are grown-ups, will allow others to um, to witness their own vulnerability in the world. You don't want your kids to develop as rigid and fragile human beings, thinking that they have to protect a certain type of a certain kind of identity that can be threatened by others. This is a very I think damaging way that children can can inherit, in terms of developing themselves from parents. And that's the easy way, right? Because parents, um, if they keep this kind of rigidity and this kind of idea of perfection, and promote that towards their children, um, it's an easy thing to do, right? Because you are developing this kind of, okay, I'm this flawed human being that I know I am, but I am not willing to let my children see that, right? Because I want them to, first of all, see in me something that I myself cannot see, right? So if I cannot feel like good about myself, at least I feel like that if they think that I am good, right? So so we get, in this strange way, some sort of satisfaction from receiving appreciation from our children, um, you know in the context of us projecting this kind of idealized image. And of course, if that ideal image that we are projecting starts to be um, poked at by our kids, we become nervous, we become triggered. We are like, don't talk to me like that, or I don't know, this is not your place to question, or why are you asking me this? They have the right to ask you anything, like literally. They have the right to ask you anything. And not only that, you have the moral obligation to take the time and answer to them in 10,000 different ways, if that's necessary, until they won't ask it the same way. Because if they ask it, it means that it's important to them. It means that they want to learn and know. And that's something about you that they care about. And you, as a parent, if you love them, and you do, you have the job of fulfilling their own curiosity, because this is how they will end up differentiating themselves in life, by having a very dynamic way of interacting with the world, of you fueling their curiosity and allowing them to investigate deeply things that are meaningful to them. And if you are not helping them do that by simply telling them, with rigidity. Don't ask me that. This is not your place to ask me that. I'm your parent. You're my children. You should not know that. You don't care about that. Why do you do that? Stop. Don't do it. Um, and I'm talking to me like some years ago, because in my own way of finding how I want to model, parenthood for my children, I came to this kind of limitations myself. Um, because no one teaches you being a parent until you become a parent, and even if they would, that would mean nothing. Um, there is no better way to being exposed than the curiosity of a child. I'm pretty sure that you agree with me on that. So when I realized that it's not my role to be perfect, and I should not be perfect, and acting perfect will actually harm my child, what I should do instead? I should create with them together the best relationship that we can together, because a relationship requires two people, right? At least. So it's me and him, or me and her. And we discover things about ourselves as we develop in our own pace, against our own conditioning in a way. Luckily, they don't have that much conditioning. Um, Me, I have a lot of conditioning, and some of it I discover it only through them or thanks to them, because they expose those things where I'm not yet free, right? And because of my projecting on them my own fears and insecurities, I realize where I have to work, where I have to really understand myself first. So if you think about it, parenting is really an incredible way of, improving yourself. And it's this kind of altruistic, you know, um, process, an altruistic effort that you do for the benefit of your children, which in turn ends up helping you, of course, on top of that, but you're not doing it for your own reasons, like you would do it, you know, as as a person in their 20s, trying to, go on top of the world, and, with this kind of more or less egotistic drive of pushing through, and I am going to improve myself, I am, unstoppable, I'm resilient, I'm gonna stop at nothing, and so on. That's good, of course, but that builds you up directly. If you end up in your 30s and you didn't follow that kind of path, and you didn't become relentless until you were 30, which was my case, I was just simply disciplined and structured, and I was cruising along alongside some sort of a comfortable ride that, I built for myself somehow along the way. um, but in terms of improving myself as such, as a human being, and the relationship with myself, I was not in a very good place. And for sure, parenting helped a lot, and it's currently the one thing that I rely on the most to improve those elements where I know that I still have to do some work in, right? Because if I'm just thinking by myself and meditating and introspecting, of course that helps, but that comes from a place of my own current understanding of myself. Of course there are some subconscious insights that can come up, but it's a much more direct route to allow my children to show me where I'm not yet free, or where I'm not fully integrated with myself by the way I'm reacting. If I have this kind of, if I detect some sort of a reactive pattern where I'm not thinking, and I'm just, reacting in a way that is authoritative, just because I can do it, because I'm their parents, then that's a clear sign that I have to do some work. Because ultimately, a 4-year-old child cannot be responsible for making you angry. I mean, that's absurd. In itself, it's very stupid if you think about it. Because it's like, you are an adult, and you have this small kid who is genuinely curious about things. And yes, I account for the fact that sometimes it can be very chaotic because they are tired and they are hungry and they are sick and it's like a mess. But isn't that isn't aren't those the very moments where they need your composure and your calmness and your emotional stability the most? Because this is when they are the most vulnerable, when they are not feeling good, when they lose themselves, when they don't have any kind of you know pillar of stability around them and they are a complete mess. How can you add on top of that, right? How can you contribute to the problem by you losing your shit? When you think about it, it's really a disservice that you're doing to them. And of course we are doing it to protect ourselves in a way, because at a certain level we also are some you know we also have this inner child in us that gets still to live in us, that didn't receive maybe all the love and all the attention and all the nurturing that it needed at some point in our own lives, and we are projecting that, and that inner child could eventually project as well, outside on our children. And we get, like, for example, when we get judgmental in terms of them not playing with the toys that they have, right? The immediate kind of thought that I get myself as a parent who, despite all the love in the world, I didn't have endless amount of toys, right? I had like some few toys that I really cherished and I longed to get, because I knew that when Christmas comes, when my birthday comes, I will get a toy. I really cherish that. And when I see my son, that he has a lot of things and he just throws them away, and like, I have a new motorcycle and then he smashes them, and it's like the instinct I have, which for sure comes from that inner child of mine, who is like triggered by the act, and he's like, how can you do this? Because I didn't have this when I was like a child. How can you waste it? How can you not respect this? And then I get like upset and nervous and angry. And ultimately, it's my problem, because they didn't live what I lived. They don't know the alternative of not having toys. I created the environment for him to have toys from the very moment he was born, and from this is his whole life experience. He doesn't know what it means not to have toys. He doesn't know what it means to be deprived of something or not have something when you really want it. Because now if he tells me that he wants something, I have to actively stop myself not to fulfill his wish, which is very counterintuitive for a parent who would do anything for their kids to be happy. And for sure, you are resonating with this. So, as a parent who can afford to create this kind of what we would consider as parents like healthy development environment, it can indeed end up harming them, because at some point it is too much, for sure. And we continue to do it out of our own need to heal our own inner child for all the time that he didn't have all these toys, right? And I relieve, or I heal my child, my inner child, by seeing my real child, my own child, playing with the toys and projecting onto him the kind of behavior that my inner child would have had if he would have had these toys, right? So it's a very subtle thing here, and we take it for granted, that this is not how you should play with the toys, right? You should not break them. Yes, objectively speaking, it makes sense, you should not, but why shouldn't he? Why should he do better? Because he's 4. He doesn't have any kind of right or wrong, this kind of sense of why breaking things is not good, in a way, right? For us, when you are 30, 35, 40, breaking things for no reason becomes such a clear waste, that it's extremely obvious that you should not do it. And we project that obviousness to a 4-year kid who has no idea about how things should be done in the world. Isn't that crazy? You see, by simply talking about this, even when I'm talking about this, I become clear on things that I would otherwise be confused by. When I talk about this, I realize indeed that I have now better chances to catch myself when I cast judgment on my kid when I see him trying to break toys. Because I realize that what I'm saying now is true. And he really doesn't have this kind of longing for toys because he always had toys there. And even if I tell him, look, I will take them away, he knows that he will get them back in one day, or he will get other toys in 2 days from now, even new ones, even better ones, right? So even if I'm saying things and I mean them, and he would be maybe upset for one moment because he will not have any toys to play with, he will get them back, and he knows that. Well, I would when I was a child, I could not have risked my parents to take me the one toy or the two toys that I had, because I knew that, if those two are gone, then I have to wait maybe another couple of months to get a new one, and I didn't want to risk that, so I cherished them by default, right? So the environment, the context in which I was developing myself, forced me to develop a certain relationship to the objects that I had around me, and that's different for every person, right? Every person lives in different contexts, in different environments. I'm pretty sure that some parents have really no problem with seeing their children breaking toys because they themselves had endless toys and they themselves didn't care about breaking them. And now, when they see another person, a small child, breaking the toys, they're like, no problem, right? So you see how projection on the outside tells something about ourselves. And you can use this in your daily life, not necessarily in parent child relationship, but in every kind of relationship. Because everyone in our interaction, in our day-to-day interaction, everyone can trigger us. And instead of casting judgment on them and telling them, you should not say this to me, please don't do that anymore, you should first think, why is this so important to me? Why did this very specific thing they said made me uncomfortable and ruined my whole day and made me think about this, at the expense of anything else? Now, I'm not saying that you should just take all the negative things from the outside and not care about them. I'm just saying that no one is responsible for determining how you should feel about a certain situation. No one, ideally even close ones, even close relationships, should not directly impact you in a way that is predictable. Because that means that you are not stable with yourself by yourself, and you rely others to confirm you in who you are. And that's a very dangerous place to be, right? And that should not happen even with close relationships, because those people love you, yes, unconditionally, but at the same time, they need you to be stable emotionally, because if they have a problem and you depend on them to be there for you, how can you help them? Isn't it a responsibility that you have to help those who care about you when they need support? That's a completely other story for another time, but I will just give you still an example on this. And this is related to my wife, not my child. But just to tell you that projection is a self-assessment tool that works in all relationships. When my wife has a problem and is linked to my behavior, then I become triggered and I steal the emotion away from her and I make it about me. And I tell her how her judgment on me causes me to feel these things, which then makes this whole, like, I make this whole case about myself and how I feel because she told that to me and so on. And then I basically don't have any kind of regard anymore for her own problem, which is real. And it's her problem, right? He has an emotional response to something that I did. She tries the best she can to tell it to me. Of course, that triggers me in a way that I cannot handle it in a decent way, in a strong way. And then I steal her emotion and I make my case about myself. And then I project my own problems onto her back. And she ends up telling me, like, I don't know how it happens, but whenever I have a problem and I want to talk it with you, you end up being the one who has the biggest problem, and I have now to support you. And for the longest time, that was like, yeah, she's just, like making these comments just to poke at me. But I realized this is the case, and this is the case simply because she is the unconditional stability pillar that I need in my life, so I can feel strong and good. And if she has a problem, especially with me, then how can I then help her if basically I myself destabilize my very pillar of strength, right? If she cannot rely on me, or she if she has something that um, you know would like to address because of my behavior, that basically breaks the whole foundation and makes the foundation very fragile for me. And I don't know how can I be myself anymore. I don't know how can I support her, how can I be strong for her if she's not strong for me in the first place. But you see how unfair that is, how unfair that is. Because irrespective of how I feel, she felt it first. She had this need first, and she came to me for help and for resolution. And I stole that away from her. And I told her, no, 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 okay, it's my problem now because you said this about me. So I don't care about your problem. It's my problem now. So you have to take care of me now, right? It's amazing when you speak about this, it becomes so tragic comic, but it's true, and we are doing it unconsciously. So again, I will finish on this. Reflect on your behavior, reflect on what triggers you, reflect on how each and every relationship in your life can be an incredible tool for improving yourself. Because if you improve yourself, then it's an act of care towards the others. You show them that the next time in a similar situation, you will not react in the same way. And they will remember, huh, this guy, when I pushed those buttons, maybe they do it consciously or unconsciously, when I pushed those buttons, he reacted in a certain way. Now, when I push these buttons, he doesn't react in the same way. Interesting. And at least it's intriguing. But with time, that builds more rapport, that builds more respect, right, between the two people, and you cannot be taken for granted anymore. And now you stay your ground, you stand your ground, you are okay with yourself. You have this kind of pillar of stability that you nurture for yourself, by yourself, with the help of others. And because of that, you get to give them back the improved version of yourself, which ultimately, you know got to develop. So you got to develop thanks to them in a way, because they exposed you in the first place. And that's why kids are the best at this, because they can expose you very fast without any kind of remorse, without second judgment, and they do it for fun as well sometimes, right? So they're having fun, and we are like getting, angry and nervous, and we are the adults, right? So they're having fun, they poke at us, they say this, they say that, they see that we can trigger, that they see that they can trigger it with something, and they do it because they just like to see how we react, and we lose it. And children, they, you know more than anyone, they need us as pillars of emotional stability, more than anything. If they lose it, we cannot lose it as well. Because if they see us as their whole world, and the parents are more or less the whole world for a children, for a child, under 5 at least, if we don't present them that kind of space in which they can be themselves, chaotic or however they want, then that's very that's very damaging for them, because they cannot, they feel that they cannot rely on us, right? If they cannot afford to feel weak in our presence, if they cannot afford to be, to lose it completely and be angry in our presence because we will get angry at them, we are suppressing their own need to feel heard and understood. For what? For our own incapacity of dealing with our own issues, with our own problems, with our own limitations. Think about this. It's not easy, but it's an amazing tool. Use your children as ways of triggering that which must be addressed in you. And instead of reacting impulsively, stop, take a break, even go out like in a different room for 5 seconds, take a few deep breaths, and just react differently. And once you stop reacting this way, in an impulsive way, you will realize that you will steadily but surely progress towards a different kind of person, where you will get to feel more comfortable and more confident in your own capability to stand stand your ground in difficult and challenging situations. And you will see that with time, those situations who tended to have this kind of high emotional impact on you, they are going to get diffused much faster. Why? Because you are not resisting them anymore. You are not adding fuel on the fire anymore. Instead of starting to be angry yourself, you are just allowing them to be angry as your responsibility as a parent, because that's your responsibility as a grown up, as a parent. What we have for sure on top of children, because we have, um, like evolved brains, adult, more evolved brains, we can regulate our emotions in real time. They cannot, right? But we can. And in real time, we can, ideally in real time, at first it will not be, but again, take breaks, take a few deep breaths. And with each new similar situation, you will see that there will be a gap between their trigger and your reaction. And once you have that gap, then you're on a good path, because then you will just increase that kind of gap, and the trigger will lose its power onto you, and you will realize simply that you used to be triggered by this and now you are not triggered anymore. And this is literally rewiring your brain, and you are acting differently simply because your brain is interpreting the situation differently. It's very, very powerful. And it's amazing at how many opportunities you have each day to practice this for free, with no psychologist, with no therapist, with no coach, with no one. Just kids triggering you, and you taking that trigger as a gift for analyzing what is it in you that responds to that and why. And then have the courage to inspect that and realize that this is your own limitation. This is something that you have to fix for yourself. And once you fix it, you will create the kind of loving space for your children to express themselves, to continue to explore with curiosity life and their surroundings, knowing that you are there for them, to protect them, not to judge them, and to be the kind of role model in the end, right? That you aspire them to take as an example in the world. So I hope this helps, and start to put this in practice, and you will see amazing results. Good luck.